Since the forecast highs are now hanging out below zero, we've got to tell you about the best ways to warm up, which is, of course, to cozy up with a good book. And if your warmth that comes from books is a little short because you've made your way through your reading list, fear not, because it's the November edition of What to Read here on Classic 107 with our good friends from McNally Robinson Booksellers, co-owner Chris Hall, back with us for the November edition. Nice to see you as always.
Good morning, everybody.
So, when we're looking for books in colder months, what sorts of qualities do you assess so that we can be at our, not necessarily that we need to be comforted, but at our coziest and most warmly edified, perhaps?
Well, for me personally, I like a good, I think of novels, I guess, mostly, but I describe some of them as quiet, and some of them are just take you away, and they're not too much going on, not too much thrilling aspects, but just kind of quiet, just kind of, I think that's kind of one of the books we have on the list today, actually, but just one that will quiet the world and for a little while, which, almost any time of the year, that's a good thing.
Well, it's funny you say novels because I'm looking at this list here and I think I only see one.
That's true.
Which is very interesting to try and edify ourselves with the nonfiction as much as the fiction. I'm going to start with one of the nonfiction titles. We have two memoirs on this list, and the first one that we have is by a legendary musician and author in Patti Smith, her latest book, Bread of Angels.
Yes, absolutely. She likely needs no introduction, especially to music fans. And we have some big fans at our bookstore, Booksellers. I always am amused when she announces a new one because everyone gets excited. They're always talking about what she's doing online and so on. Her first memoir, Just Kids, that was a huge success. That was her first one. And since then, she's written several more books. Some memoirs, some books of photography and journals that she's become known for as well. And this is an account of her life as an artist, from her childhood in a condemned housing complex, complete with consumptive children, vanishing neighbors, an infested rat house. And she had to escape all this through her imagination. Wow. And then she takes us through her teenage years, those first glimmers of art and romance, and then on through an early marriage and children. I've heard this described since its release just this week as her most personal book. So that may be. She suffers losses and experiences grief and gratitude, so she really does get on the personal level. But within all that, one constant on her path in terms of artistic freedom and the power of her imagination is writing. All of this time she was writing constantly. So she describes herself as a vagabond. She travels to commune with herself, and she lives to write and writes to live.
It's quite something to hear you or to hear others describe to you that this feels like her most personal output, because we feel, I think as fans of Patti Smith, and I count myself among them, that we know so much about her because of the sheer volume of her artistic output, which exists in all these different mediums, as you have said. And it's fascinating to be able to read her travel exploits on her Substack, which I highly recommend. What do you find from people who work in so many different mediums, so many different kinds of art, about the way that maybe rounds out the way that they write compared to people who purely write?
Well, I think, some people are focus and are specialists, and some people are very much more able to, I guess, be generalists, take in more. I've always thought of myself as the latter. I'm always able to be interested in a lot of things, and then you try to bring them together. So she certainly offers that perspective. There's a lot to be said for specializing and getting really good at something. But the generalists are they're able to make connections, because we all have a variety of aspects of our lives. And when we can connect the pieces, I think it's a powerful thing.
The various aspects of a life are also well examined in the only novel on your list. first, The Ferryman and His Wife by Frode Grøten, the
Very well
Norwegian author. Yes, indeed. What can you tell us about this? A book that's very well timed for November, I might add.
It is released in November on purpose, I believe. He is a new novelist to me and probably to English readers. But he's very well known and best-selling author in his native Norway. And this is one of those quiet novels about a ferry driver named Niels Vik, who wakes up one November 18th, and he knows it will be the day he dies. He follows his morning routine as voices from his past echo in his mind. He takes a last look at his empty house, and he steps onto his boat. His dog, who has been dead for many years, leaps aboard with him. And then the other dead begin to appear, people from his past who accompany him now, and they're showing him what he might have missed before. And he waits for his Marta, his late remarkable wife, to finally join him on the boat again. It sounds sad, and it kind of is, but it's also inspiring. It's a real reminder to us all. Appreciate every day we have and everybody who joins us on our own journeys. It's maybe a little sentimental, but not too bad, and that's okay sometimes anyway.
Yeah, right. I'm also sensing here a theme for you in that the last few editions of What to Read, you have brought in books that mess with the fabric of time and with narrative structure, things that are very much less than maybe a conventional way of presenting a narrative. And you mentioned that this is maybe a big introduction for Grøten to the English reading world. What is it about his writing style that has captivated you as you've discovered him in the last little while?
Well, maybe I have to go back to that quietness, but that idea of multiple time frames is something that art and novels do, and they do it regularly. At least the novels, as you point out, that I like. It's we could all draw a line in literally on the ground of the places we've been in our given days or our given last hours, but where have our minds been? Our minds have been all over the place, and how would you ever draw that line? And so the time kind of comes back and forth. We remember constantly. And so, I'm more fascinated by where have our minds been?
Well, and our minds have taken such a drastic turn, or our attentions have been so diverted in recent years by these very instant sort of gratification forms of entertainment. If you're scrolling through TikTok, if you're watching short form content, if you're taking in media or news content in very limited sorts of forms, I would imagine also that this has an impact on our reading habits. So to have something like The Ferryman and His Wife around also invites that quietness and that more deliberate sort of engagement that can provide the coziness of November reading.
A little bit of a retreat and slowing down time, if that's possible.
Yes, exactly. It can take some effort to do that, though. And I know we talked about an order before we came to air here, but I'm going to call an audible on you here because there is another title in this list that talks about trying to get ourselves away from these very quick sorts of entertainment fixes on tech platforms in particular. This is Tim Wu's The Age of Extraction.
Yes. Yeah. Tim, this is a completely different kind of book than we've been talking about. Nonfiction, as you say, Age of Extraction, How Tech Platforms Conquered the Economy and Threaten Our Future Prosperity. And Tim Wu is a professor at Columbia Law School. He's written a few books, but one including one that called The Attention Merchants, and that was in 2016. And that caught my eye and sold quite a few. And it was about how big tech became competitors for our attention. His new book kind of follows up on that, because now that those companies have been successful largely at learning how to manipulate and monetize our attention and data, what are the results and where do we go from here? And the story of the internet, if we go way back to the 1990s and 2000s, it was supposed to bring widespread wealth and increased democracy, supposed to democratize everything, you remember? And what it actually has done is deepened wealth inequality and aided the spread of autocracy. So Wu frames our current moment with lessons from those from that recent past, and then he envisions a future where tech advances can serve a better or greater good, better or more, and offers proposals for taking back control, economic balance and prosperity for all of us. It's hopeful, but it's going to take some work because we have gotten ourselves into a mess.
The question of writing style also probably comes into play with a book like this, because extracting ourselves from these tech platforms, trying to take back control, as you say, from ever creeping advances in things like AI and things of that nature can feel so immensely difficult to do. How does Wu, in your estimation, present that kind of argument in a way that people can very tangibly understand some steps that can be taken in order to retain that kind of control?
Yeah, that's a good question. He's a good enough writer, I guess, to put it in its shortest version. Yeah, because dry topics of all kinds in the wrong hands can remain dry, but some people have the magic, and sometimes they bring in more narrative, more examples, more metaphors, and those sorts of things. But I think he's just very clear and very concise, and maybe I'd have to think about it, but maybe he turns it into more of a plot, like like this happens and then this happens and then this happens. Something anyway is very compelling about it.
Another compelling read in the nonfiction genre coming out this month also addresses something that Canadians in particular are very much attuned to at this time of year, and this is the new book from TSN journalist Rick Westhead called We Breed Lions, about Canadian hockey culture.
It is, yes. Its subtitle is Confronting Hockey's Troubled Hockey Culture. And Westhead is an investigative reporter, as you say, from TSN. And in May 2022, he broke the story surrounding the Team Canada junior players and the alleged sexual assault of the young woman in London, Ontario, as well as Hockey Canada's attempts to keep the details of that case quiet and out of public view. He then covered that case right through the trial at which all the players were acquitted of all charges this past July. So here he backs up and takes a larger view and does a deep dive into the state of hockey in Canada today. Speaking with those who have been sexually assaulted by hockey players and then struggled with local police officials and seeking justice. He goes into the dressing room to speak with former players about their experiences with misogyny and homophobia, hazing initiations they have to go through in order to be one of the guys. Overshadowing the story are the gatekeepers, the league officials, team owners, members of the sports governing bodies. They've been so willing to sacrifice the well-being of young people of all kinds in the name of the status quo and ultimately profits.
Maybe this is a book that also helps us to hold in tension the excitement that comes from a thing like the World Junior Hockey Championships, which makes up so much of the television watching in Canadian households over the holiday seasons, certainly. And also to be able, and Westhead is a TSN journalist where these broadcasts tend to live. How do you think maybe this can help us be thoughtful consumers of hockey? Because there are going to still be fans.
Absolutely.
And there are still going to, this is still so much a part of Canadiana, for lack of a better word. How do you think that this helps us to be more thoughtful consumers, if not considering what role this plays in our lives entirely?
Yeah, well, it makes me think of the fact that these hockey players are people, and so they're really good at the sport they do, and we love to watch that. But they are also people, and sometimes we're surprised when we meet them, and they're just, I think Dylan DeMello had an article in the paper where he said people say, you're just a regular guy, and he's, of course I am. But they are also treated as superstars. They are also held above, maybe sometimes outside of the rules the rest of us follow. So I think that's where the culture has to make sure they can be regular people, and they, in my experience, they are great people, and they want to be. But sometimes stardom and fame gets ahead of lots of people, not just hockey players.
Of course, another indelible part of Canadian culture. You would probably put Margaret Atwood into that category, and she has a new memoir as well for the final title of our What to Read list this month. A memoir of sorts. Yes, she says, called Book of Lives.
That's right. Yes, her subtitle. This is her memoir. a very big deal in Canada as well as the rest of the world. Frankly, it's a big release for them internationally. So obviously needs no introduction. She has finally written a memoir. She has been pestered to do this, as she says in the opening pages. She has had her misgivings, which she details, because in her mind, she has spent a lot of her life sitting at a desk writing, and what could be more boring to convey than that?
Right.
But of course, she has plenty of stories from her life to tell. So she is, right from her childhood, she spent most of each year in the wild forest of northern Quebec. It was a childhood unfettered and
Wow.
nomadic, sometimes isolated, but also thrilling and beautiful. And from there, she unfolds her professional life. And what she does is she links seminal moments in her life to the books and as they were released in her life, and how they, of course, shaped our own sense of our literary landscape. Right from the cruel year that spawned Cat's Eye to the Orwellian 1980s of East Berlin, where she wrote The Handmaid's Tale. So as we travel along with her, more and more, of course, is revealed about her writing, but also those connections between real life and art, and really fascinating look at the workings of one of our greatest imaginations.
Yes.
And,
a great way to put it, too. Our greatest imaginations. Amazing to get this insight into that imagination. In the last little bit of our time together here, Chris, if these titles are not enough for people, and we'll post these on our website and on our app as well later on today, there is another opportunity to take in great books at McNally Robinson Booksellers, the Traveling Book Club, which I understand is filling up quite quickly.
It is, yes. We're right down to it. It's the coach is filling up, and so the last few spots are available. We last year met in our classroom in our store, January, February, and March, to talk about books from a book list, and then in April we traveled to Scotland to the settings of the books and the homes of the authors. This year we're going to visit France. So if you go onto our website, there's all the information there. We have an information session on November 27th. You could come and hear all about it. There's no pressure. There's you can read one book. You can read 0 books. You can read all of them. If you do, I'll be amazed. I'm not going to read all of them. But it's really a book list that we get to share and recommend to each other from. It was really a lot of fun. In fact, the Scotland tour has organized a dinner. They want to get together and see each other again. So a lot of friendships made, a lot of fun had. So no pressure. You don't have to be a scholar by any means. Just an enthusiast, as I like to describe myself.
We will link to all of that information at our website, classic107.com, and the Classic 107 app. Those titles for our What to Read list in November. Once again, Bread of Angels by Patti Smith, The Ferryman and His Wife by Frode Grüten, We Breed Lions by Rick Westhead, The Age of Extraction by Tim Wu, and Book of Lives by Margaret Atwood. Always a pleasure. Mr. Chris Hall of McNally Robinson Booksellers, thank you so much again for coming down to tell us what to read in November.
Well, thanks as always.